Welcome to a Council of Black Belts. I'm Shihan Scotty Phillips. I hold the current ranking of 8th Dan in the style of Aido-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, and I will be the moderator of this episode, Wisdom. What is a Council of Black Belts? It is simply what the name implies. A group of black belts from various martial arts styles coming together to openly discuss various topics in and around the martial arts. In addition, it's an open discussion not only in martial arts studies and or instruction, but to incorporate the martial arts into one's daily life. Our topic of discussion today is wisdom. Dictionary.com defines wisdom as the state of being wise, knowledge of what is true and right, coupled with just judgment as to action, discernment, or insight. Confucius said, we may learn wisdom in 3 methods. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. The Bible speaks of 2 kinds of wisdom in James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambitions in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For you have envy and selfish ambition. There you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who show in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Wisdom in the Japanese culture is expressed in proverbs, which come in 3 forms. Inirashi, a short saying, and bits of wisdom. Yojikinho consists of only 4 characters to create the saying and may be the hardest to grasp sometime. Kanyoku are idiomatic phrases and are typically longer than Yogijinho. The following comes from the Martial Arts Congress, the Guardian Manual, Lessons in Martial Arts Leadership. The character traits, the roots of martial arts. Lesson 7, Wisdom. In daily life, the virtue of wisdom is one of those virtues that may be initiated and nurtured in a training hall, but which plays out mostly outside the training hall. Much of what a guardian needs to know and to nurture wisdom comes from sources outside the training hall. It is also very much ongoing. The wider the breadth of one's life experience, the greater the opportunities to acquire wisdom. Outsiders may consider training to be a guardian to be limited to the training in self-defense techniques. Guardians in training learn very early on that this is a serious error. Should a guardian ever think, okay, now I have wisdom, he or she will have just proven that they do not yet. The panel is now open for discussions. What are your thoughts and or experiences with wisdom? Please feel free to share your thoughts as well as additional topics you would like to see. If you're interested in being part of a Council of Black Belts, please let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Reach out to me via email, aido1982@gmail.com. That's AIDORYU1982@gmail.com. Now I'm privileged to share additional thoughts from other black belts. First, from Grandmaster Michael McCann. Grandmaster Michael McCann shares his thoughts on wisdom. As martial artists, we strive to gain wisdom from our teachers as they show us the path that lies before us. As a sensei, it's my privilege and obligation to share my nuggets of knowledge to my students who hopefully apply that knowledge until it grows into gems of wisdom, which when internalized becomes understanding. As a Christian martial artist, my ultimate sensei is God, creator of all that was, is, and is to come. Each of us have our own belief systems, and I respect you and your choices. It's not my goal to debate theology in this article, but to share knowledge and wisdom to benefit all mankind. I can only share from my Christian viewpoint in 50 plus years in the martial arts on how to obtain wisdom from my ultimate sensei. Where can one go to learn to be wise? Tricky question, because wisdom is more caught than taught, more practiced than studied. The Bible writers knew this and couched their highest teachings on becoming wise in easily remembered sayings. 5 keys to lifetime growth in wisdom: respect for God, an inquiring mind, sound judgment, passion for wisdom, common sense. 4 benefits of a lifetime pursuit of wisdom: rewards, value, understanding, and power. Grandmaster Richard Hackworth shares his thoughts on wisdom. The real irony of learning how to defend yourself is that most people who know how to defend themselves never have to. Lots of people who wind up having to defend themselves got into that predicament by making really bad decisions. The number one self-defense skill: good decision making. This comes from the wisdom gained from martial arts training. As you get wiser and your martial arts skills increase, there's a rise in your situational awareness that helps you naturally avoid dangerous people and places. Spatial awareness is developed through the practice of techniques and forms. The ability to start and stop on the exact same spot is an example of this spatial awareness applied to martial arts. You can sense when someone is getting close, too close to you, even from behind. Sifu Keith Fanning, master instructor of Blue Dragon Iron Fist Kung Fu, shares his thoughts on wisdom. It is believed that wisdom comes with age. That is not always the case. Wisdom comes from experience. I have met some very wise people on my travels, and I've met my share of not so wise people. And a warrior's wisdom shows itself when he knows which fight is worth fighting. In everyday life, we must use our brain and senses to assess situations and learn to adapt what's happening around us. Dynamic risk assessment is a great way of looking at certain things. We make dynamic risk assessments every day without even realizing what we're doing. We put our seatbelts, we visually check tires, we look in the mirror before we pull off in the car. That's just 3 examples of dynamic risk assessment, but it's also a form of wisdom. Wisdom not to just jump behind the wheel and sped off and think that everything is going to be fine. A martial artist must do this on a daily basis too. For example, you will walk on the edge of the pavement instead of against the wall. You will walk in lit up areas instead of the dark alleyways. These are all simple and effective signs of wisdom and how your training has taken hold. In older times, when warriors carried swords and other weapons, they had the wisdom to make sure they stayed in areas big enough to swing their weapons. And on the flip side, they also knew to draw someone with a larger weapon in a smaller area so they could not swing theirs. As said earlier, wisdom does not only come with age, it comes from experience. My master got me to work as a bouncer security guard, so I would gain some experience in knowing when to and when not to fight. All these things teach you lessons that you then try to pass on to your students, friends, and family, sharing the wisdom. In a conversation with a friend who's a higher ranking martial artist, he talked about wisdom and knowledge. We talked about how having the experience and calmness of the mind can lead you to not having to fight or engage with an adversary. I suppose you could say wisdom comes in many forms and can be hard to define in a broad context. But instead, when you add knowledge and experience in a certain field, then the wisdom is plain to see. Next, Frank Clay shares his thoughts on wisdom. Wisdom is a loaded term, one that's hard to define. Generally, it's viewed as the sum of one's experience, knowledge, and training. Through these things, one develops a worldview that guides their every action. As with all things, some have a greater propensity for it than others. However, like most things, it can be developed if one so desires. Martial arts, or Mudo in Korean, is a way of life and covers several Korean martial traditions. That way also takes the same factors into consideration when developing the person. As with physical practice, one will get out of developing wisdom what it sacrificed. Through Do, one gains maturity that melds seamlessly together, yet there is a caveat: one must learn control. Wisdom, for the Mundoan, is therefore the combination of experience, knowledge, training, control, and maturity. How is this developed? The very first thing is to keep one's ego in check. One cannot develop maturity or control while fostering the ego. Meditation will help develop the mental discipline that obliterates the folly of ego. Physical training will help conquer the body. Once the two have been mastered, one then approaches wisdom. A practitioner of martial arts cannot be a Mudayan, without working on this battle daily. Next, Dr. R.W. Stone shares his thoughts on wisdom. Wisdom is associated with the attributes such as unbiased judgment, compassion, experimental self-knowledge, self-transition, and non-attachment, such as ethics and benevolence. One who considers how we might recognize another martial artist as wise must first try to compare the factors that might influence our opinion. Certainly, a very athletic person or one who has learned many techniques can be quite impressive, but that alone does not automatically bestow the honor of being considered wise. Consider this: although a chimpanzee is far stronger than the average human and can be taught to kick, jump, and do backflips, that does not make it a martial artist. By the same token, a person who has learned many techniques without understanding the principles behind those techniques is also not truly wise in the arts. There's a reason people frown upon the term monkey see, monkey do. This is why the above definition of wisdom mentions the need for understanding to gain wisdom. For example, one might learn a particular wrist lock without an understanding of how to properly enter its application, how to react to counters, how to utilize concepts like torque, redirection, or the utilization of an accompanying neurostun, thus rendering the wrist lock in actual combat ineffective. Understanding must be joined with the experience to acquire true wisdom. In the genre of Western literature, there's a familiar storyline about the small-town gunslinger who has learned to draw and shoot amazingly fast. With nobody in town to argue or educate him further, he believes he is the best around. Best, that is, until a stranger arrives from somewhere else to challenge him, and during their confrontation, the local fast draw doesn't even get to clear leather. He's got educated quick, as they say. I've personally met supposedly high-ranking martial artists who were not even aware of techniques which in Korea or Japan would have been the norm for a white or yellow belt student level. They had been taught by kiddie karate instructors who had little or no understanding of the whys, wherefores of the art they professed to teach, and who had never been properly educated to the belt level they claimed to hold. Wisdom also requires common sense, insight, and self-awareness. There are lots of people who wind up having to defend themselves who got into that predicament by making a really bad decision or by allowing personal issues like pride, ego, embarrassment, or competition to cloud their judgment. Attaining the virtue of wisdom is not easy, and it takes a great deal of time. To quote a line from the movie High Road to China, the oxen are slow, but the earth is patient. I'd like to thank the black belts that contributed to this episode, and we look forward to hearing each and every one of you again on our next episode. Thank you for your time, and be blessed.